Hello, everyone. Good morning. And dzień dobry. I hope I said that correctly. I'm very excited to be here, and I'm very grateful for all of you to be here today. I'm also very grateful for the Callstack team for organizing this wonderful event. Today I want to share a lot of the PlayStation app history and some of the things that we've been able to achieve over the past few years with React Native. And I'm going to kind of like reference a little bit, not necessarily reference, but I'm going to be kind of like making a counter argument to what Łukasz was mentioning earlier about React Native not being good enough or not being a good tool for development. So with that being said, what I want to talk to you about today is our journey in scaling and really developing the PlayStation app across the years. So for today's agenda, I would like to focus on four key things that we were able to achieve. One of the things is that we were able to scale the app so that we could have 4 times the features that we used to have in one of the previous versions of the PlayStation app. We were also able to scale the teams that were contributing at the same time by a factor of 9 times. We were also able to scale the number of contributions per week. This means the number of PRs that were going into the main branch or the master branch per week. And lastly, we were able also to have a very high session stability with a very low percentage of crashes in production. Before I speak about all of that, I want to give a little bit of PlayStation app history for all those of you that maybe don't know anything about the PlayStation app itself or just in general PlayStation. Before I dive into the history, I want to do a quick exercise with all of you. And I'm going to throw you all the way back to the last decade for this, specifically to 2010. I want to do a quick show of hands of who had a smartphone back around 2010. Please raise your hand and look around. As you can see, like some of you, probably like 30 to 20% of the room had a smartphone in 2010. Next question that I want to ask you is, and this might be like a little bit obvious just because of the event that we're in, but who has a smartphone nowadays? I mean, of course, why wouldn't you? But you know, in my defense, I'm pretty sure that the reason you have a smartphone nowadays is not because of React Native. You are a developer in React Native because you have a smartphone. So around 2010, PlayStation recognized that the market or the public in general was getting accustomed into accessing all of their personal information or the most important information for a user through a smartphone. And so the first PlayStation app was released in around January 2011 for both Android and iOS. This first version of the PlayStation app had a bunch of features, quite a few features. Some of the most important features were users or players were able to see the games that they owned directly on the app. They were also able to see their friends and their online statuses. They also had the ability to see all of the trophies that they had won on the games that they had played. They also had access to official information and announcements directly from PlayStation. And they also had the ability to share some of that information through Facebook, Twitter, or email. A few years later, around 2016, we started expanding the number of apps that we had. We still had the PlayStation app, which I already explained, but we also have the PlayStation Messages app, which is an app dedicated for asynchronous communication between players. This was optimized for users being able to communicate one-to-one or with the groups of friends that they had. And lastly, we had the Communities app, which was an app for making sure that the users would be able to connect across their communities that were important for them and around the games that they were playing in. In 2017, we wrote the first PlayStation app written fully in React Native. And users immediately loved this new update. They liked that the app was very consistent with the look and design of other apps. And for us, we proved that we were able to build a full-fledged application at scale directly on React Native. Around 2019, the PlayStation 4 era was kind of like at its end of its life. And so we had to think about what was going to be next for us in terms of experiences that we were going to offer, not only on the mobile app, but as a whole across the different systems that we have. So before we could analyze any of this, we needed to understand what were the most recent trends around mobile app development and design, and also what were some of the most successful apps that were around the time that were the most downloaded. So in order for us to do that, we had to look into some of the most downloaded apps, namely Facebook, Instagram, Uber, and TikTok. These apps started out with very specific features. For example, Facebook was an app that was meant for you to connect with friends and family, maybe share like your statuses or pictures. But increasingly, over time, they started adding new features such as a marketplace, fundraisers, and dating. Instagram started out as a picture sharing app, and they started adding tools for businesses to be able to market their products. Also, they started adding tools for content creators, and they started adding reels and stories. Uber started out as a ride-hailing app, and now it offers grocery deliveries, food deliveries, and even car rentals. The same with TikTok. Started as sharing as an app that you would use to share short video format app, and you would, over time, the app would add new features that were complex video editing capabilities. So as you can see from all of these apps, they started out with a set of core experiences and use cases, but they expanded those core use cases and experiences to other types of use cases. And we knew that we wanted to do the same for the PlayStation app. For the PlayStation app that we had for the PS4, we had a few of the features that were already present on the PlayStation 5, but in order for us to really make the next generation better, we needed to think about not only the features that we were currently supporting, but other potential features that users could leverage when they were away of other consoles in order to augment their PlayStation experience. Now, I would like to talk a little bit about what the development would look like in order for us to achieve this vision for the future of the PlayStation app. The first PlayStation app that we built with React Native served to us as a case study of what we could achieve with React Native. With it, we proved that we were able to build big and robust enough app so that we could build like more and more experiences. We didn't have, at the time of building the first PlayStation app, we didn't have enough knowledge of what React Native was, or React, for that matter. So we learned a lot of the development practices over time. So when we started analyzing what we were trying to create for the next generation, we knew that we wanted to create a better experience. That was a fact, kind of obvious. But we had to think about what questions did we want it answered. And so we thought about how big is the app going to be, regardless of the functionality or the requirements, the technical requirements that we might have. How will we be able to scale it if we needed to onboard more team members into the code base? And what were some of the features that we were trying to bring in the beginning of this new PlayStation version? We didn't have any of these answers right away. However, we knew that we had to carefully consider and think through what we wanted to do in order to achieve this vision that we had. Because we didn't have any of these answers, we kind of like knew what we wanted to define as our North Star on the things that we wanted to achieve. And some of the things that we wanted to achieve were that we wanted to keep the app fast, regardless of its size. We also wanted to be able to scale the app, regardless of the number of features that we were going to bring in. We also wanted the development to be agile, regardless of the number of contributors that we were going to have at any given point in time. And we also wanted to bring in, as with every generation of PlayStation, a new set of visuals, delight, and experiences that players were going to enjoy. These were the ideals that, these were the ideals that we set out to deliver for the new version of the PlayStation app. And so this was kind of like our guidelines of what we wanted to achieve. As I mentioned before, back in 2016, when we created the first PlayStation app written in React Native, we didn't have any experience writing any React Native apps. And so we didn't really know what the development practices, what good development practices were useful for us or were going to be future-proof. We also didn't know what tooling was available for us. So we had to kind of like build things on the fly as we were going. And because of that, this version, the PlayStation 4 version of the PlayStation app, was built around the features that we were trying to bring in. And so we started creating a few sections within the code base. We had a feature section that later on would begin to be broken up into multiple subsections. We had a common component section. We had also common code section, and we had a core code section. The differences between each of these are that, for example, common core were helpers that you would be able to use in any given feature that you might be developing at that time. Common components, so that components that were displayed in a section of the app look the same in other sections that would meant to show the same component. And we also had the core section, which was core functionality that all features required in order to work. Once we shipped the app, and it started growing in size over the years. We also created this other concept of mobile core. This concept of mobile core was meant to house another set of concerns, namely internationalization, navigation, state management, and local storage. And this section was meant to be able to transfer to other potential apps that maybe we wanted to build into the future. As I mentioned before, around 2016, we had a multitude of apps, and so we didn't know whether or not we were going to integrate those apps or maybe build more apps around the PlayStation Network. As you can see here, these two sides, both on right and left, have seemingly different concepts. However, if you take a look closely, they're pretty much the same, and it can be quite confusing for developers that are working in the PS app. It was definitely confusing for us at times. You might think that this might be a little bit innocuous or simple concerns that we might be able to fix over time. But as I mentioned before, because we were developing, or we started development of the app around the features, a lot of the code that we ended up having was very tightly coupled to the features that started the app development. This kind of divide can be very problematic for anyone that's trying to contribute new features to the code base, because these concepts do overlap. How do you know what to place in mobile core when you have also core in the section of features? Or how do you know when a common component could be migrated to another mobile app? And so for new team members that don't have historical knowledge of why this divide was made, it was quite painful to have to go through the code base and try to understand, if they're trying to build a new feature, where should they locate their code. For maintainers that are analyzing where new features are gonna be located, it can be quite painful as well, because they have to have extensive philosophical conversations about, well, what is this component, and should it be a mobile core component, or should it be maybe a common component, or a common piece of code that any feature is going to reuse. This is definitely a situation that nobody wants to deal with, and we definitely didn't want to deal with going forward in the future. So we wanted to avoid this because it was time-consuming, and it was honestly mentally draining. Now, maybe some of you might be thinking things like, maybe you had this problem in the past, or you have this problem right now within your code base, or you might be thinking that there's no possible way to fix this kind of like mixing of concerns. However, this is something that, as you're developing an app with a new technology, it's perfectly normal. I don't want to make you feel, if you feel identified with this, I don't want to make you feel bad about yourself or your coding skill. It's perfectly natural when you're developing with a new technology, make these kinds of assumptions in the beginning. As I mentioned, this experience that we had was very foundational for us to set us up for success in the future. Now, moving away from this architectural diagram and going back to the new generation of PlayStation, we had all this prior knowledge of and experiences around how to design a React Native app. So we had to take a step back and look into what we had built over the years and try to think of what we wanted to build so that our code base could be not only more concise, but maintainable and extensible. For the next generation of the PlayStation app, and trying to avoid all of the things that I showed on the last slide, we got together and we had many, many discussions. These were very critical for all of us so that we didn't fall into the same pitfalls that we fall in the past. So we settled with a set of concepts and rules that we thought were going to be more easy to follow and easy to adopt for anyone that wasn't related to the code base. We had three major layers that would cover the entire code base of the project, and each of them served a unique purpose. We have the application layer, the features layer, and the core layer. The application layer contains all of the logic that binds all of the features together, and also contains the necessary code for the application to be able to boot and to navigate around the different screens of the app. The features layer contains only code that is specific to each of the features that we have in the app. Because features can vary on its size and complexity, depending on what type of feature we're looking to bring into the app, we might create a dedicated section for that specific feature. And we also have the core layer that holds all the code that is agnostic to all of the other layers, the application and features layer, and also has code that is foundational to the app. This is code that you need to have for any app that is considered an app that you want to ship to the public. For example, internationalization, the library for maybe local storage, and those are some examples. The app was modeled as a monorepo, and so we have different packages depending on the layer that you're looking at. We had different packages in each layer. So in the features layer, we have all of the different packages for the specific features that we support, and on the core layer, we have core functionality packages that are specific to the requirement that we're trying to meet. The rules that we follow in order to bring new functionality into the app is that, for example, if we're looking to add a new feature, the application layer is an orchestration layer. And so its main purpose, it's only to direct the different navigation patterns and show the different views that we have across the app. The feature layer, it can only access modules within the core layer. That means that if a feature needs to access another feature or needs to route to another feature, it should do so through the application layer and not directly with another feature. This is so that features are not tightly coupled and they can be more extensible and we don't necessarily need to worry about circular dependencies or navigating into weird scenarios. And lastly, the core layer. In the core layer, core modules can access other core modules. They can rely on them. However, we encourage that if your core module is accessing other core modules, that we should keep it at a minimum. These were the concepts and rules that we established for us to be able to build the new generation of the PlayStation app. With it, not only did we achieve a clear set of definitions and concepts, but also we were able to define clear guidelines and rules, specific ownership of the different modules and features, and decouple all of the code that we had in the past. So now I want to share some of the results with you of this exercise. I want to mention that these results are compared between the PlayStation 4 app that we built with React Native to the new PlayStation app that we built for the PlayStation 5. And also, I'm going to share some retrospective thoughts on some of the things that I think could be improved. The first thing that I want to mention that I mentioned at the beginning is the scaling of the features. When we built the first PlayStation app for the PS4, we had around 5 to 7 major features. And we were able to scale that to over 20 major features that the app contains today. Some of these features are specific to mobile that do not exist on the console platform. We were also able to scale the teams. We started out in the PlayStation 4 generation of the app with 2 teams, one in the US and another one in Tokyo. And we were able to scale that to more than 17 teams spanning multiple locations around the world, specifically the United States, Japan, Canada, and India. We do release monthly binaries, so all of these teams are working together at the same time, targeting monthly releases. So we've come to a point where it's very difficult for us to have a problem with the binaries that we release every month. Another great result that we were able to achieve because of this set of rules is that we have dedicated ownership of the code. And it's much easier for us to determine which team should address which issue or which team should analyze maybe some impact of a new feature that we're trying to bring in. This is with the help of GitHub's code ownership system, of course. Because we implemented the system, we were able to get from roughly 10 PRs a week to more than 60 PRs a week in the PlayStation 5 code base. This is something that I think a lot of React Native developers struggle for the most part. And it's keeping up with updates on both operating system, React Native, and many of the, maybe you're importing many of the libraries, third-party libraries to support your application. We've been able to minimize the effort of React Native upgrades, Android updates, or iOS updates overall. And what I mean by that is that we have a very low crash rate. Currently, it stands for every single binary that we release to 99.8% crash-free. And this is considering that we have like tens of millions of users in production, monthly active users. So this stats might sound great, and it might sound like we have everything figured out. However, that's not necessarily true. We have some problems that we need to address, and I want to share with you some of the downsides. One of the downsides of this expansion is that onboarding to the code base is difficult, especially if you're a junior engineer. Not only do you have to like see what all of the code that we've been able to develop is, but you also have to onboard to a lot of complexity that has been built into the app. Component discovery, since we're adding newer features every single time, being able to reuse some of the components has become a little bit of a challenge. So sometimes developers or teams need to create their own components, even though the components might look the same. And lastly, introduction to new features. Some of the features that we introduce might have an impact. And so analyzing that impact and determining how much is it going to cost to bring that feature without downgrading the API, the other features, it's difficult. And lastly, I want to tell you a little bit more about what's next for us. Obviously, this is something that a lot of us are excited about, the new architecture. We're currently on the process of understanding what the impact of the new architecture is going to be. We also want to make it easy for users to only have the features that they're most interested in or that they use the most in their app at a certain point of time. We also want to improve our governance so that the teams that are onboarding or the teams that are trying to bring new features into the app have an easier way into building those features. This is going to be my last slide, and if there's anything that I'd like you to take away from this session, is that React Native is a powerful tool. However, it won't automatically enable you to build a great app. It also won't deter you from building a great app. But I want to encourage all of you to think through what is it that you want to build. I'm not advocating for you to adopt all of these concepts or rules, but rather for you to take the time to analyze what you want to work on. As I mentioned, React Native is very powerful, and you should leverage its power. Thinking through and agreeing on the processes and concepts that you have is very important. It is also very important to honor those processes. And lastly, I want to encourage you to adapt when needed. And that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much.